So today we're going to learn how to do a double. If you haven't checked out my technique video on how to do a single, please go ahead and do that. The link is going to be in the description box below. So the difference between a single and a double is your release point and how quickly you get to your release point. Whenever we're increasing the tosses, the amount of time from your dip to your release is going to lessen in order for you to get your toss out. And this is going to be really important. The other thing is for a single, we catch it on count 2. For a double, we're going to catch it on count 2 and. So as we're increasing our rotation, we're going to increase the amount of time by an and count. So when we move on to triples, it'll be 3 counts. But right now we're just doing doubles. The release point is going to be your rib cage. You want to make sure that as you go into your double, that you're starting off thinking about your dip. For our dip in this video, for technique purposes, we're just going to go ahead and do a standard dip from left flat going into a quarter dip position. You want to make sure that first and foremost, before you take your toss, that your dip is really solid. So let's go ahead and take one. 5 and 6, 5, 6, 7, da, da. And I want to make sure here that I'm really thinking about only rotating my wrist. And I want to make sure that I'm snapping that right hand up and keeping that elbow down and my forearm in line with the edge of my butt. Let's do that one more time. 5 and 6, 5, 6, 7, da, da. Now from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my release, which is my down out, and I'm going to be releasing at my rib cage. So it's not going to be like drastically different. We're just going from our belly button level to our rib cage level. And that's going to be the difference. So whenever you're tossing rifle, especially starting out, a lot of times what people do is when they toss that double, they're going to make it too high. For example, that was a really high double. That double was actually the height of a triple. So what I want to do is I want to think about from that dip, making sure that I get to my release point faster because that time I was really slow to my release point. And then the other thing is I want to think about stopping myself at my release point and not continuing to lift my hand, because if you had noticed the toss beforehand, I was continuously lifting it throughout that release, making it higher. So let's go ahead and take a double the way it should be. 5 and 6, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1 and 2, and. So as you notice in that toss, it was a lot different from the toss before. The toss before was much higher. This one, the rotation point was lower. Let's take it one more time. 5, 6, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1 and 2, and. And so what's happening is I'm catching it on 2 and, which means that I'm keeping my right hand down, and on count 2, my hand is coming up, and then on 2 and, it's going to meet the rifle in that catch. You want to make sure that whenever you're doing technique tosses on rifle, that you're really thinking about how you look lower body-wise. You want to make sure that you are thinking about engaging your abs, engaging your back muscles, engaging your glutes, so that you're not moving and utilizing those hips in order to get the toss out, or even your lower body. Those are going to be 2 things, especially when you are newer when it comes to rifle, that you're probably going to tend to do because you aren't quite understanding what needs to happen in order for you to get this toss out. So you want to make sure, if I lift my heels, what I'm going to do to counteract that is I'm going to lift the toes of my shoe. So let's go ahead and take that with my toes lifted. 5 and 6, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1 and 2, and. And so if I had lifted my feet, what I did was I counteracted that. So in that toss, my feet were not lifting up, which is what should be happening. You want to think about your feet as roots in the ground. And you want to think about like that nice sturdy foundation. That way, whenever you're going into your tosses, your center of gravity is where it needs to be. So that's one thing that you need to think about with your tosses. The other thing is, again, making sure you're engaging your glutes and your glutes and your abs. That way that you have a nice strong posture. A lot of times what will happen is people will tend to push their hips forward whenever they're tossing to give it a little extra oomph, because they're not really thinking about really engaging from their back muscles all the way down to their fingertips in order to get this toss out. Whenever I teach tosses, I like to think of using the butt of the rifle as like a pendulum, right? So whenever I need to have a little bit more rotation, the first thing that I need to do is think about pushing down with that right hand, out. And that's going to help get that additional rotation that I might not have. The other thing is making sure that when I'm going into my release, that I am having a good dip to release timing. So if I dip on count 8, right, 5 and 6, 5, 6, 7, 8, on count and I'm holding 1, I release, 2 and I catch, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 1 and 2 and. So you want to think about holding that and count, because what's happening is it's giving that energy a place for you to send it on count 1, going into the release of that double. And that's going to be super important. Now, if you're somebody who's struggling, and let's say you are catching on a half, and you don't know whether you're over or under rotating. If my toss goes like this, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1 and 2, and that would be me under rotating my toss. What that means is I need to check my dip, make sure that my dip is good, first and foremost. And then secondly, if it is good, check my release point. Once I've done that, then I can say, okay, am I pushing down hard enough with my right hand? 9 times out of 10, if you're catching on a half, it's because you're either under or over rotating with your toss. And it has something to do with your right hand 9 times out of 10. That other like 1% would be obviously release point. But whenever you come to these lower tosses, as long as you're thinking through your checklist of, okay, is my dip what it needs to be? Am I releasing at my rib cage? Am I pushing down with that right hand? Then you'll be queuing yourself up for a good toss. So just make sure that whenever you're practicing your doubles, that you're thinking through your checklist. That's really important. And if you need to break something down, go ahead and do that. Take a couple dips if you know that your dips are really sloppy. Once you get that, then you can go ahead and take a fake release. When it comes to a single or a double, a fake release is a little bit harder to do because your wrist is supposed to be in line with your elbow. However, it's not lifted quite enough for it to be like comfortable. So the whole point of a fake release is to not be comfortable, but it is quite difficult to do with a single or a double. Going into my fake release, I would go down out and I would hold my rifle at this upper 45-degree angle. Now notice where I am right now is really more for a triple. So that's what I mean when it's a little bit more difficult to hold that fake release for a double, because you would be down here and that's really going to hurt your wrist, especially if you don't have a lot of wrist dexterity. The other thing is when you take your fake releases, you have to be very careful that you're keeping your elbow down as you're doing that, because you don't want to develop the habit of having your elbow go out and opening up more so like a wing. So just make sure that you're really thinking through that and you're problem solving as you're taking your tosses. So let's take that toss one more time. 5, 6, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1 and 2 and. And you want to make sure that you're squeezing and pulling apart and you're nice and strong as you're doing that. Last time, 5, 6, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1 and 2 and. I hope my comments were helpful. That's the video on how to do a double. If you have a question or a comment, please go ahead and comment below. Or if you're one of my students, go ahead and just send me a remind message or shoot me an email. And that's how to do doubles.